Distance? Okay, let's go ahead and start. If we could find a chair here. I am a member of the seminar committee. We always have someone here to introduce our speakers. I know one of the speakers pretty well. That's going to be talking is Liz, my wife, and I think Bromley, if I saw her earlier. Oh, here she is. We'll also participate, as well as we have probably the opportunity for other members of the committee to provide some information. So this is called Taking Care of Our Church Home. And what we have is a Building and Grounds Subcommittee. We don't, some churches have that as a regular committee. We didn't have one, but we now have a subcommittee of the Board of Business, I believe. So maybe eventually it'll be its own committee, because I think it's a very important part of keeping our church home in proper shape. So I'll turn it over to Liz.
I'm Liz Harvey, and I'm on the Board of Business. And just to give you some history about how we got to today, I was the Board of Business representative to the education wing renovation that happened last year before last, whenever that was. And worked with Jim White, was the chair of that committee, and Carol Barron was our liaison between Flanagan, the company that was doing the renovation, and the church. And so I've worked with Carol before on habitat projects and Biloxi work trips and so forth, but it was great to work with Carol and get her perspective of the status of our buildings and grounds. And so as we got into that renovation project, we became aware, we already knew that there were a lot of leaks in the roof, but we just became aware of all the subsequent damage and other related issues with plumbing and so forth. And so I took this information back to Board of Business, and I said, you know, it was supposed to be Board of Business's responsibility to take care of buildings and grounds, but we hadn't been doing a very good job of that because we were so focused on finances. And so I said, you know, we really need a special group. Other churches have boards of trustees or buildings and grounds or something. We need a group that is dedicated solely to looking after our church property. And so they agreed. But in the meantime, we were talking about the problems that we'd seen in the education wing, and Carol was showing me that, you know, this is kind of campus wide. It's not just the education wing. And so Board of Business authorized House Masters report. House Masters is a group here in Gainesville that does home inspections, or some commercial properties too. So we hired them to come in to give us an assessment of the whole church property, just the buildings. They don't do grounds. And it was overwhelming. We got this 550-page report back from them. And I mean, it just was overwhelming. That's all I could say. It was just amazing. I mean, we knew that, you know, it'd been COVID for 2 years and people hadn't been here, and we didn't have eyes on the building and that sort of thing. But we've kind of had a history of deferred maintenance and patching things when there wasn't money to do it properly. And so, you know, that saying, I'm a seamstress, you know, a stitch in time saves 9. You know, if you take care of a problem when it's little, it doesn't become big. You know, need a lot more. Clearly that hadn't happened. So then we said, well, what about the grounds? You know, House Masters didn't inspect that. So then we were checking with other purveyors about sidewalks and parking lots and retention ponds and courtyard drainage and all these other things that fall in tree work, fall underground. So we were beginning to get a big picture of the status of our buildings and grounds. So they're aging, you know, just like our bodies, you know, and we all know it's good to get good preventive health care, and we haven't been doing that. So as we had these stewardship campaigns year after year, we would have in that proposed budget money for capital improvements or going into capital reserves to handle things that would come up. And then invariably we wouldn't make the budget. And that's the first thing that gets cut, is that money going into capital reserve. So we didn't have a big fund there to draw on. So John and I have had more encounters with the medical profession in the last couple of years than we would like to have. But as I was thinking about this, I was thinking in terms of the physical health of our building. So as I was trying to sleep night before last, I was thinking, our roof suffers from incontinence. The gutters, the plumbing and the grounds all suffer from constipation, if not blockage. The foundation suffers from stress fractures. Joints need knee and hip replacements. Room dividers are shuffling their feet. Switches suffer from arthritis. Cancer's eating away at trusses. Some of the HVAC systems, excuse me, have pulmonary embolisms that could cause death at any moment. So, those are not all John's and my problems, by the way. Some of those are. Anyway, it's quite a state of affairs. So Board of Business established this Buildings and Grounds Committee. And I did a lot of research talking to other churches with boards of trustees and talking to other people about what kinds of things should this committee do and be responsible for. And so we kind of came up with a scope of work for this group. And aside from prioritizing the house master's report and the other information from the grounds consults we had gotten, we are hoping to create this 5 to 10 year plan, this projected plan of costs, when air conditioning systems are going to go out. So we can project for how much money we're going to need down the road for various things. So that's one of the things we're going to do. We're going to try to come up with a really good record keeping system, which we've started. And so we're going to fine tune that so we have good records on what's been done and when and so forth, and the various vendors. So those are the kinds of things we're going to do. We're going to do periodic audits every 3 to 5 years just to make sure we're not missing things. So we have some of our members here today. So we're going to go around and introduce, but maybe Bromley has comments first. No? Okay. All right. Well, I'm just going to start down there with Glenn, and you can just introduce yourself. I had the pleasure of recruiting these people, and people had in the churches, I talked to them about what this committee needed to look like. People gave me suggestions for names. So a lot of these people were suggested. We're just so fortunate to have all these people who are really highly skilled, talented, and perfect for this job. So I'll just let them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their background and why they were willing to do this.
Yes, my name is Glenn Manns. I was not recommended for this. I basically came out of the woodwork, for sure, literally. But there you go. Yes. My wife and I became members in March of this year. What drew me to Building and Grounds is that I really enjoy landscaping and home projects, rough carpentry, all sorts of things. And I like to get down and dirty. So if you want holes dug or plants removed or trimmed or planted, I'm your man for sure.
Thanks, Glenn. Glenn and I have actually collaborated on a couple projects in the courtyard, working on some drainage issues. And he sells himself a little bit short. He is an incredibly hard worker. And a lot of the improvements that you see currently in the courtyard in terms of drainage, it's all this guy. He's really stepped up and put in some seriously hard hours working. So I am so grateful that he is part of this group. I'm Eric Smith, and I think I was brought onto the group. I have a background in arboriculture, and just a quick story. In 1988, I was living a few doors down. Literally, I was right there on 17th Street in one of those brick houses. And I remember this area being kind of wooded. And with the exception of like this spot here. And I remember thinking, wow, that's really strange. They have all these woods and like, we're so close to campus. What are they going to do with that space? And then eventually, I saw the sanctuary being built a few years later. And I was really impressed by the fact that, the decision-making that went into putting these buildings together and where they're at, whoever was doing it, and I'm looking at you, Larry and Sandy sitting in the back there, they did a great job of kind of nestling it into the trees. And the trees weren't as big back then, they were much smaller, but I thought they did a really good job kind of fitting in to what was existing here. But over years, those trees have grown. And I think there was a big wake-up call in 2004 when we had a couple hurricanes come through and there was just total chaos on Fifth Avenue, trees falling right and left. And I think a lot of work was done then. And then when I actually became a member the year after that in 2005, I started looking around with some of the other church members and we thought, there's a few trees that, have a few problems. And we started doing some tree removal, a little bit here, a little bit there. And so over the time, that I've been a member of this community, we have removed actually quite a few trees, and we put some trees back. But I think with COVID and a lot of stuff happening, I think it, doing the really heavy lifting on the grounds kind of took a back seat. And so I appreciate Liz and Candace and folks who were really taking a hard look, and Carol, where we need work. And so that's where I feel like I've been able to help a little bit, just providing some information about, okay, this is a laurel oak, we can let it go. This is a live oak. We should do a little bit extra effort to preserve that tree. So just a little bit of information to help the process. And then we had a great work day yesterday. If you take a look at Fifth Avenue, between the parking lot and Fifth Avenue, there was an amazing group of people. I see Jim sitting there, Stephen Bottomley sitting behind him. There was a whole bunch of folks that gathered up yesterday morning that did just amazing job. And Liz just pulling vines. You must be so sore today. But just did a great job. And literally that was probably like a decade worth of growth between the parking lot and Fifth Avenue. It just looks amazing. So I'm really appreciative to all the people who stepped up and helped out with that. And it was just church members, just all of us, from a 2-year-old to, I don't know how old the oldest person was, but, and Glenn was there, and yeah, so we had a great time. So I'm just happy to be.
Take it home for supper last night.
Yeah. But we had a great time. It was a lot of fun. And we have another, I'm just putting a little plug in. We have another event. Hopefully it won't be nearly like the heavy lifting, but in, I think it's the third Saturday in January 21st. So, but that's just part of the process. What you're seeing outside the buildings, what you're seeing inside the buildings behind these walls. That's this wonderful person sitting next to me here, Carol Barry. Carol, take it away.
Hi, I'm Carol Barron. I'm a state certified residential contractor. I'm a developer. I work for the city of Gainesville and Neighborhood Housing Development Corporation and Habitat for Humanity as director of construction. And I've built a couple hundred houses here in Gainesville and renovated probably 100 houses in Gainesville. And I lose sleep over this church. I've been coming here for 20 some years, and it kind of breaks my heart to see it crumbling in front of my eyes. And so I did step up to the plate, and I was involved in the educational wing, which turned out really beautiful, but it can't stop there. It has to keep going. You know, we've got some generous donations for solar. We've on this wing over here. We've got this roof stabilized, but we stopped. We ran out of money. And I really do lose sleep over it, you know, so I'm hoping we can get some generous people to donate to our cause, because I want to keep going. I want to fix our courtyard roof, and it's just like a leaking sieve up there and can't be walked on. And there's some major rot in our beams, and the HVACs are 30 years old. I mean, we're talking about borrowed time. And so I will pass the torch to the money maker.
Oh, I have never been called that before. Yeah. Yeah. Right. There is a whole subculture in American Christianity and global Christianity where if you pray, God does provide. So I invite you to be further blessed by sharing your, it is, you know, I'm a pastor's kid and I grew up more in parsonages than my parents didn't purchase their own home until I was starting graduate school. And so my first sort of experience with responsibility for a home was actually like for a parsonage and a church building. And I have told the story on many occasions that in my first congregation, I was like the most able-bodied person because it was a very small congregation and quite elderly at that juncture too. So I spent a lot of time like learning about things I had no idea about and my parents didn't know about because they'd never owned a home. And they were 4 years in. But and I remember actually the first time Josh and I bought a house and we had to replace, I think it had, I don't know if it had a boiler or a furnace, but I was like thinking it was, you know, I'm like, oh no, you know, like, what do people do? Because the only experience I had was like with a church boiler and that was like 60 grand. And I'm like, I don't have 60 grand. So when the person said a home size boiler is smaller, I was relieved. Anyway, so there are, so every congregation I have served thus far has had, before UCG has had a much older building, like was built and no one around, no one who was still around had been involved in the fundraising or the founding of the congregation. And so one of the things that is so marvelous to me about UCG is that we have, we have folks who have been here since the beginning, who were part of the purchase of this building and and then all of the subsequent fundraising and visioning and then fundraising to get us up to the point where we have this facility that we have now. And it is, you can see the love and the attention and the care as we've been starting to think about how we're going to fund some of the deferred maintenance. We pulled out the big fat file of documents because, of course, back when the sanctuary was built, we were having there was not a shared drive at that point, maybe for the files. So everything is in this paper file. But I've been reading through it and reading the sort of testimonies and the plans and the reasons why it was necessary to expand the building. And it's so, for so many congregations, their buildings were built so long ago that no one sort of remembers why they needed the space. And we can't forget why we need the space, right? We still, even now, have, trouble finding spaces for all the people who want to do programs and things like that. This is a vital congregation and we need our building to serve our ministries. So at any rate, I am so grateful for Liz's gentle prodding of the Board of Business to establish the Buildings and Grounds Committee, and so wonderful, so grateful for these folks who have given me a broader picture of what it is that our building needs and has going on. So at this point, I'm going to say a little bit more after what Liz said about where we're at in the process, and then invite you to think about why you're here and what brought you to this conversation today. So we got the House Master Report, and we did the grounds sort of audit on our own. You know, these folks all put together the sort of experts and brought in different folks to give us a sense of where we're at on those. We started with a sense that the most immediate need was for the roof in here. We were gathering for the women's retreat on site in February or March, and it was a gloriously rainy day. And then it was raining in here and also in the youth room. And we were like, well, that's not great. So we moved things around. We were ably led by a group of folks who helped us switch rooms, and we figured out what to do that day. But it became clear that that was like a really immediate and pressing need. And so we began to think about how we might fund that. We have applied for this loan from the Cornerstone Foundation, which is a UCC ministry. And with some of the remaining funds after that roof project, we will be able to take on a small portion of the projects that yet remain. But so then as we got the House Master Report, this group then convened, and they went through this really incredible process of naming the priorities for each project. So is this a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4 in importance? And then we had to add some categories. Then we had the 4 pluses, and they were marked by, and then the 4 plus, no, and they were marked they were evaluated on the priority list for a number of factors. Some were around, how does this not working affect a ministry? Is this like adversely affecting this? So for example, the showers in the over here in the West Wing, those bathrooms, we discovered that there had been some leakage from one of them when we were doing the education wing renovation. So they fixed that. But if we don't have showers that don't leak, or that don't have water problems, then using them becomes a problem, damaging what we've just invested a good amount of money in fixing and making lovely. But also, when we host Family Promise families, we need to have working showers, right? We need to have, that's an important part of them being able to stay here. So how does this affect our ministry? Also, we talked about safety as we've looked at the courtyard, and some of the sidewalks and parts of the parking lot. There are trip hazards around the fountain. It's settled. The bricks have settled unevenly, as happens, and we've had members who have tripped and fallen. So safety is another category. Some others are around the cost of deferring further. What if we wait, how much more will it cost us later? So the roof is one of those, right? So they had, what else am I missing? There were other categories. Yes. Visibility, right? Mission. Safety, like breaking in. Yeah. So a whole list of categories. So everyone then on the committee took different parts of the report: plumbing, HVAC, electrical, grounds, windows, doors, roof. So, and evaluated the projects that were under there. And they combined all of these and started to rank them, and then also start to look at kind of like what would be the cost of this. And then they also had this other sort of like side thing, which was, what do we have to do first? So like it might be that trees, paying for tree trimmers, unless it's in imminent danger of falling on a roof, wouldn't necessarily be at the top of the list. However, we had to remove a number of trees before we could have the roof fixed over here on the west wing. So establishing what the sort of necessary pathways were, what we had to do first. So that was another big thing. So we're sort of there now. We are each and every day praying for the closing of the Cornerstone loan. It has been the lengthiest process. And I don't even know. I can't even say anything about it other than that I'm sort of horrified about it. But anyway, as soon as that comes, we have a number of projects that we will sort of finish or start with and use the rest of that funding. And then but then we're sort of in a holding pattern to see how our enlistment campaign goes this year. The Board of Business has done some wonderful reflection on how they're going to adjust our budget to make more room. We've also started talking about a capital campaign and what that might look like. So we've got sort of a number of these pieces in place, but that's sort of where we're at the moment. We've done a lot of evaluation. These folks have done an amazing amount of work. We're ticking off things that are low-hanging fruit or things that can be done with Glenn Mans's sweat equity. No, with all of ours efforts, but that's sort of where we're at the moment. So do you have, what brings you here today? Why are you, why did you come? Anybody? You Mary? Wonderful. Thank you.
Just say that again. I just said the reason for being here is just to find out how we can help and how we can facilitate the group's activities.
Yeah, I just want to know, how bad is it? You know, like on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe you could tell us. Also, well, you may have different numbers, but is there any part of facilities that does not get used here? I want to know, like, how much of the space is used, how much of the time? I don't know.
I'll do that because I work in the office and all of the building gets used pretty regularly. So we have groups constantly meeting during the week, and even, you know, in addition to all of our yeah, I mean, really, we're like trying to schedule things all the time. Shauna does a wonderful job of fitting in who's where and what the needs are in each particular space. But like, so this afternoon, so we're here, then the kids did their United Tribes combined lesson because they're all together working on the pageant right now in the West Wing. Later this afternoon, they'll be back in the West Wing for OWL, the 20 some odd kids who are learning about their bodies. And today they're learning about stereotypes and gender expression. So, and yeah, so anyway, so the building is used throughout the week.
I think one thing that kicked us in gear was when we were considering renting out that space for a school. And that brought to light the plumbing issues. So when you ask how bad it is, you have plumbing issues that need to be taken care of. And we do have retention pond problems where they haven't been maintained and they flood up to the foundation. And this foundation here is starting to fall. And then this whole area is rotten in the courtyard. So I think that those things got triggered by just the idea of the use of the educational wing and a school.
Yeah, yes. We were nervous about what would happen. Our toilets, for the most part, support us at the moment. Although we did have some excitement here the morning that we had the closing up of the OWL lock-in. So, you know, 25 kids and 4 adults had been using this particular toilet for the most part. I mean, they used the other ones too, but this was closer, right? You didn't have to go outside. And then the next day was I think it was Mary Clark's memorial. And so that morning, anyway, got to pull out my trusty pastoral plunger and, just kidding. It's a regular plunger, but, but it, so our systems can only handle sort of so much use. The hammer on the urinal. Yeah. Yes, I'm sorry.
Why don't we just pass it? Because everybody's here for a reason.
Just curiosity to know what's going on.
Well, I'm here to support Eric in one way, but I was a member of the Board of Business at least 5 or 6 years ago. And many of you don't know this, but I'm a public health educator by training. So Liz's analogy about prevention really resonates with me. And I'm happy that we're finally doing this. I mean, 5 years ago, we were talking about this and I witnessed, movement from the capital reserves to the operational budgets. It's like you say it does, not like you, I don't stay awake at night because I'm not that close to it. But I think I've never heard in this church, like not only how much are we behind that we need to catch up with, but how much on an annual basis do we need to do? When I worked at UF, I did budgeting for my department, and how much do we need? And there's some of us who like numbers, like me. And I think we need to communicate that. But I also know that we don't want to alarm people. Right. So how do we balance that? But I like transparency. And there's all these fundraising goals where there's a giant thermometer and all this other stuff. But I think there's kind of a taboo. I've been here only 10 years. So many of you have been here more than me. But what I kind of get this feeling is that there's a taboo to talk about money. And and so I would just welcome thinking about that, thinking about that transparency. And I don't have the solutions, but I do good with numbers. And I think a lot of people in the church are really unaware of money stuff. And we're a very generous church, but why haven't we been generous with the maintenance fund? I think maybe because we haven't made people aware that we need to be generous with the building and grounds. And I know it's not sexy. Every time I would talk about it, people would say, oh no, they love to give to Food for Kids and people love to give to the Rawlings Market and people love to give to the programming, but people don't love to give to this. Well, I'll give.
Bill Hoppy, and I am on the Board of Business, but not part of this building stuff. I wouldn't know one tool from another, but it seems to me from what everybody said here that the basic problem is water, and water in the wrong places and not where it should be. And I assume one of the problems is just trying to get those in order, as Carol brought up. I mean, do we have to do something about the drainage before we do the plumbing? Whether that's yes or no, that seems to me that we're going to have to do this. I hope we can get around doing this because it's an emergency, because that's going to stuff something else. And so we've got to have a major plan that says if it is, we got to fix drainage before we can fix plumbing. Drainage will cost us X, plumbing will cost us 5X, whatever it might be.
Well, I'm here because I'm concerned about UCG, and I can recall maybe a year ago or so, I was out in the courtyard and I looked up at like the beams there, and there's this big, huge gap. And it's like, I hope somebody's aware of this. It should have been fixed, So, and I'm not sophisticated about building stuff at all, but that was just like glaringly obvious. I had to start taking required minimum distributions this year. And I actually have more money now than I've ever had in my life because all my money's tax deferred. So I am going to give a gift. But yeah, I'm interested in how bad it is.
I guess the analogy I'm thinking of is the church is like buying a ship or boat where you just keep pouring more money into it. It's a big hole in the water and that you just put money in there. So I guess my thoughts are, I was talking to Eric yesterday and thinking about this, working in the parking lot area. I guess we got 50K for selling parking spaces to Publix, which is a nice chunk of change. So I'm wondering if we can somehow work this into the budget and sort of pair up the funding with the different stuff. So it's not always the tin cup kind of like, we need this for this now. And then it's sort of like, so every 5 years, maybe rather than every year, we have to, sort of like dig deep and, oh, this is that and stuff and get a little ahead of the curve on all that. I think would be helpful.
You have an intimate knowledge of the history of this place.
I'm here to listen and to support and to tell you how very happy I am that this is all being addressed now. Yep.
All right, so I was going to say, echoing how much I appreciate this committee doing this and that you have this plan in place. I love what Jane Emery said about transparency and how important it is to have that out in the open. I always have believed that the best thing about the church is no secrets, no subterfuge, no surprises. Just be right there about everything. And the second, echoing what Bromley said about what so many churches have to go through. The church I was in Connecticut was built in the 1800s. Same with my sister's UCG church in Northampton, Massachusetts, each of which is suffering the decay of the steeple. Now you're worried about, does this get used? Do you really, but I mean, they had to have a beam put across the sanctuary and then raise over $1 million just to get a steeple to stay up there that doesn't do anything. Everything we have here is essentially used, and it will get more and more that way as we recover from COVID and get back to the constant usage of this building. So again, I appreciate what you're saying. I appreciate what Bromley's saying, and I appreciate what's being said here today.
So I'm here to support this amazing committee. I've heard about it very in detail, so I know what's going on. I love this idea. I think we should have more of these. We should have listening sessions. We should have, and also the capital campaign. I also am getting my RMD for the first time this year, and there is a way to contribute it to be used towards the capital campaign. I don't know if you realize that, but you can, yeah, so you can do that. And that is completely tax-free if you designate the church. Right. So I think that's going to have to be, yeah. So it's tax-free if you donate it directly to UCG. Catherine can hold it and have it in an escrow or a fund for the capital campaign. And I think that needs to be very much emphasized to those of us who are new at this. RMD. What else? And of course, we're going to be very involved in looking at the capital campaign and how when we're going to start it and who's going to be on that committee. And we've already started the process. So.
Thank you. Does anybody, do you want to add it?
So just relating this to another congregation, I have been a poll worker for a long time, since like the late 90s at Ignite Life Center. That's what the name of it is now. It used to be North Central Florida Baptist Church. It's kind of over in my neighborhood, over off of between 6th Street, kind of behind the Publix. And when I first got there in the late 90s, North Central Florida Baptist Church owned it, and I wasn't really paying much attention to their congregation, but the place seemed like a little like it was kind of rough around the edges. And then probably about 3 or 4 years after I started working there as a poll worker, they sold it to Ignite Life Center. And over the years, I've seen, I mean, that's when I really started paying attention. The place was in rough shape. It was like the North Central Florida Baptist Church congregation had just knew they were going to sell, and they were just doing like no maintenance. And so I've talked to the property manager just like at the last election. I was just chitty chatting with him. And he said there were some buildings that were just unusable. He said it took them like a decade to like just kind of get things back after they hadn't done anything for a long time. So I guess what I'm trying to communicate is like the fact that we're taking these steps now. I mean, if we just said, you know, we're just going to like kind of live with things the way they are, that's just not going to work. And we won't have, this church won't be here for us in 10 years if we just let things kind of fall down around us. So, I mean, I think this is really critical work. It's important work. And I think it's just really important that it's happening now. And yeah, we could kick the can down the road for another year or 2 years or 3 years. But eventually, you know, it's going to be a heavy lift, and I'd rather do it now and take that, you know, stitch in time saves 9, you know, proactive attitude than just keep kind of like deferring the maintenance. So I'm just very hopeful that this process is, it just seems like there's some really dedicated people involved in this process. I mean, I'm just really grateful that Candace is done what she's done. She hasn't gotten any credit today here so far, but I just want to really, you should give her, Candace, a round of applause, because Candace has done some amazing heavy lifting and just, you know, kind of nose to the grindstone, like really looking at that report, working with all of us, keeping us on task. And I'm so impressed that she's part of this group. So, yeah.
I just wanted to say, I hope we don't wait till capital campaign. I think that anybody that wants to donate to this cause right now, we have at least $40,000 worth of stuff we have to do right now, at least.
We are all learning about how to fund big projects. So, and we just had on Wednesday the presentation of the financial sustainability and stewardship campaign report to Church Council. And so now that that's been accepted, we'll start to, apparently there was a typo, so we have to fix it and then send it out again. But that should be available too. And that group, I mean, this is such a critical moment for this church, right? We have done and continue to do so much amazing work in the community. And now we need to make sure that we have that we're positioning ourselves to keep doing that work, but also to do it here. You know, we've had, I don't think some of us understood the scope of the deferred maintenance when we did the education wing renovation, when the PPP residual funds went to that. At the same time, we have like a blossoming children's program in a way that we haven't in a while. And at least part of that is because of this warm, inviting, safe space now. So, you know, we're holding a lot of different concerns together and trying to, and again, Candace's work in sort of helping us to prioritize and figure out how we're going to make this go, not just as an independent entity. I mean, there's so much expertise here, but as part of the whole church budget system. Because I mean, it's not that no one cares about the building, right? But in lean years, you do what you have to do to keep your staff and keep your giving. I mean, the fact that we have been faithful in the amount of money that we have available for the ministries we support, for our denominational support, you know, I mean, so much faithfulness. And so again, the thing that didn't seem imminently terrible waited. But when we've, you know, and then we had COVID. So there's good reason that we ended up here. I'm sorry, John, I was going to let you go.
Yeah, I guess why I was here, obviously support Liz, but part, I guess, is the church just needs to know the magnitude of this. If you think about it, we had about 100,000 of the PPP money got spent. We've got a loan that's another 100,000. We're using most of it on the roof. So there's 200,000. There's a bunch more. So we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now we don't have to do it all next year, but and certainly the giving can be prorated over pledges. We did this with building a capital campaign, like past church, and basically you had a separate pledge. You had a capital, you had buildings, and then you had your regular pledge. The buildings didn't go forever. It was like a 5-year thing or a 3-year thing or something. So I think there's ways that you can texture it, even though it's a huge problem, you can find ways to where it's not just, we're going to expect all of this happening. And I think this committee's done a terrific job. I, as you might guess, have heard a lot about it many times. I think that the priorities that allow you to say, here's what we have, here's what we're going to do, and then work forward over a period of years is the way it's going to have to be done.
We have, oh, I'm sorry. You're talking about why we're sitting here. What brought you here?
Well, I'm sitting here because I care a lot about this church. And if our roof is quite literally falling down around our ears, then we can't do the work we need to do. And that needs to be there. And I'm also here because I would like to encourage us to, look at our ages, right? To bring along some of the younger families and younger people so that they also invest and care in this building, so that moving forward, they can continue to just sort of keep kicking this ball forward and not letting it grow that way too.
I wanted to say that there's 2 members that aren't here today. I want you to know who those people are. Jim White is on this committee also, and he's not here. And Glenn Acom is the other one. And so they both have so much expertise, and we're just grateful to have all of these people. Carol, we use as our project manager on these big projects because she has that big picture, and we need somebody to kind of keep tabs on some of those things, like the solar installation. She probably won't have as much to do with that when that happens. So there are some things that she'll have a more active role in than others, but we're so grateful for Carol's expertise.
A word about the solar. So when we started having the roof conversation about needing to asking the congregation's permission and blessing to apply for a loan to replace this roof, there was some conversation about, are we doing the most environmentally sustainable roof available? And we had a really wonderful and robust conversation about that, and did, I think, end up with the most environmentally sustainable roof option for this particular. This roof is so funny in terms of its different levels and all kinds of different things. So we did do that. But following that conversation, we had several families, 3 households, that donated the funds to install solar panels on these. It'll be on the education wing, right? The north side of the education. And so they had, that was an unsolicited thing. And that prompted a number of things. 1, our scheduling the solar panels. But 2, also a contemplation of what we do with major gifts when they're given. It so happened that this was well timed and aligning with our our church's vision of environmental sustainability and all sorts of things. And we had a brand new roof, so this was the best time to install them. That said, we also have to think about what, we all have, and if you're willing to stay, we'll do one more quick round, but we all have things that we're really passionate about, and so one of the things about doing a capital campaign, if that's, it does look like that's what we would like to suggest and what will be coming forward, but is that pools the excitement for all the different things, but gets our resources together so that we can allot it as needed. And it is a kind of process that requires trust in the folks who are coordinating the projects, right? But it also allows us to make sure that we're getting, I really need another, but we're getting the most bang for our buck, right? So that we're making sure that we don't have too much money sitting in something that isn't needed and not enough in something that is. So really this does become a congregational wide project with many, many aspects. So my question for them is yes, thank you. What is an exciting, or what is your passion project around the building? Is there something about this campus that you love? Is there something that is very meaningful to you? Yes, we'll have you start and then we'll go around. Yeah.
I love when we do things out there. And I feel like there's a specialness to that that's different than the sanctuary. And I would love to see us really bring that forward, you know, in addition to just like fixing the level stuff. I always worry when I see people walk, and some people in particular, and I'm like, oh, you know, like, hold on, don't fall. So I would love to see more use of that. Mhm.
Just to piggyback on what she said, I think it's great space, but it's really hot a lot of the time of the year. And one thing that was nice about having the services outside was the extra shade. So I know the trees are getting older, some trees are coming down. So if the roof is getting redone, maybe there's a possibility of creating more protection from the sun out there for people. And then I think the space would be used a lot more.
Thanks, Steve. Anything you love about the building or you're passionate about?
Yeah, ditto on the outdoor space, and like, yeah, having services outdoors showed us, I think, some of the potential. Yesterday did some of the landscaping work, and that I love that, and want to see more native plants, more flowers, maybe a vegetable garden where the kids can grow veggies.
Because of our membership, I think safety has to be part of this. And safety means somebody other than whatever contractor is here. There's somebody else that's saying, hey, don't leave that ladder up because we've got middle school kids who would love the climate.
I don't have any particular attachment to any place, just the whole thing.
Yeah, I don't know about attachment, but when I learned, we have 13 air handling units, 14, and Liz spent a lot of time trying to even find out how old they are. I think one of them is how old? 32 years. I mean, we've replaced ours twice in 20 some years. So we've got units out there ready to crash. So I had no idea we had that many air handling or they're that old. So it's more of just a recognition of the problem.
I echo a lot of what people said. So the seminars, low hanging fruit, I will help paint seminar A and B, or I'm an educator. It's dreary. I don't even know if you counted how many hundreds of people, both in our congregation and in the community, use those rooms. And I walk in, and I call it masking tape, beige. And I'm not, it's not, those are not happy rooms. I love what was done with everything, with the children's wing and such, but that affects our mood and our learning. So, and I would like to say plumbing, because that bathroom, I mean, you shouldn't have to instruct people with signage to hold this down for 8.2 seconds to get a full flush. So anyhow, and then I just want to say one other thing that's not related to this in a sense, but I come from a Catholic tradition, and I know a lot of persons come from some of these more conventional faith communities. And it was instilled in me pretty early what the expectation was for tithing. And I've been here only 10 years, but it seems like tithing is also like a 4-letter word, even though it's a 5-letter word. And I'm just wondering if there's some way to educate people in terms of, I mean, I've brought it up and people are like, oh no, we can't talk about money or the quantity of percentage people may want to donate or contribute because they may feel bad. And we don't want anyone to feel bad, but we want the toilets to work and we want to use the space. So I'm just wondering, and I would be willing to help with those conversations about how do we educate people? Because other faith communities, not only Christian, but others, I'm learning more through some friends in the Muslim tradition, who are Muslims, that they have like a kind of a recommendation. And I've never heard anyone even talk about that in any of the 10 plus enlistment campaigns that I've been here for. I'm just wondering if, people could possibly open up that conversation and figure out how to strategize around that, because we have generous people.
That was a part of the recommendations in the financial sustainability thing, was that they were looking at the way that we do enlistment and stewardship and the way that we educate and invite people to participate in that. The other thing is, if you got a pledge card this year and you flipped it over, you might have seen a giving chart. And so there was a sense of, if if this is your income and you wanted to give, this percentage of your income monthly or annually, this is a number you could look at, and there was a sense that, like, even just having this concrete number to say, here's a range that you might think about, if it's possible. And again, threading that needle with no guilt, encouragement. So many folks are in different circumstances, but just having that information out there, and hearing it, right? Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up with the tithing tradition too. And it is interesting to me that it's not something that people here seem to know about. So, yeah. But, yeah. Yeah. True.
I reinforce what was just said about the tithing. I'm one of those who was attracted to the church because of the lack of the emphasis on the tithing. But after being a member of this committee, just counting the number of items we have here, there are over 40 items. More than, when you total it up, it's going to be more than, and I don't want to cause a panic, it's going to be more than $250,000 to do all of this eventually. And we do need,
That's an underestimate.
yes. And yeah. And so, yeah, for sure. And so we are skating on the edge. And we do need to make sure that we have some kind of a backup fund as well, in case one of those HVAC systems goes, or one of our plumbing lines develops a serious leak and so on, because it will severely impair the operations and whatever of UCG. So it's not, a 5-alarm fire yet, but we're getting close to 2 or 3 or 4. Yeah, for sure. And so one of the best things we can do too is to spread the word amongst the rest of the congregation, from person to person, that this is indeed becoming a serious issue. And we need all the help that we can get from all of the congregation and whatever, for sure. Okay, thank you.
So one of the so church budgeting is a funny thing. But one of the sort of hopeful things to me is, as we endure the 40 years wandering in the wilderness waiting for the Cornerstone loan to close, we have paid for the whole group, right? And we do have an endowment, and we do have funds. So it's not that we are, there are I have worked in congregations where, like, you are wondering if your paycheck will bounce, right? And we are not in that place. So we have resources, and we are also a thriving congregation. We have a lot of people here, a lot of dedicated people, a lot of people who are not economically disadvantaged. We have some, you know, but we are an incredibly economically diverse congregation, and that's an incredible gift. So I have every confidence that like we can do what needs to be done. And that we will figure out the way forward. We have so many generous folks. We have so many, just so many gifts of so many types here. Again, the fact yesterday morning we were hopping here. There was the whole group of BPM in the sanctuary getting set up for today's service. And then Eric led the wonderful group of folks in the parking lot doing so much work, and it's just a wonderful thing to see. And like not just the folks you kind of expected to see. I don't know, I was surprised. And then they were like, oh, you should have heard Eric's spiritual focus. And I'm like, aha. So, and then I felt bad that I hadn't heard it. But it was anyway, I fully believe we have everything we need. We just have to get a strategy and a plan and make it go. And this conversation, which we are closing out now, is the first part of that. So, well, it's the first part you were part of, but these folks have been working hard for many months and will continue to, and we'll have more opportunities for input and conversation. So when you go talking to other people, you can talk about the pressing needs, but we are not the Titanic. Okay, we are not going down today. Yeah.
Great work. We are so happy to be doing this work. And somebody told me the other day that Larry Reimer said, this church has the resources. It's just in your pockets. I knew I'd heard that somewhere. That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much.